I went into my first American thrift store looking for a packet of small envelopes. I came out with a cottage-shaped teapot, a cardigan, several mystery novels I will probably never read, and an idea that turned $20 into $150. Not bad for a stationary emergency. I have lived in this country for years, and until that day, I had never once set foot in an American thrift store. Not once. Back home, we would call it a charity shop, and I had been going to those since before Declan was born. But thrift store sounded bigger somehow, more organized, possibly involving a loyalty card and a scanner that beeped. I needed one very specific thing, a packet of small envelopes for a project I'm not discussing today, because that is another story involving poor planning and more stationery than any adult woman should own. So I decided, right, today's the day. My first American thrift store. Let's see what all the fuss is about. I walked in expecting tidy rows. Instead, I found glorious chaos, and I mean that as the highest compliment I possess. Nobody had warned me about the other shoppers. They were genuinely their own form of entertainment. There was a man methodically turning over every ceramic figurine to inspect the maker's mark on the bottom, one by one. He had the focus of a surgeon and the expression of a man diffusing a very small porcelain bomb. There was a young woman speed-walking through the aisles with such determination that I immediately moved out of her way. She knew exactly what she was hunting for. She had done this before, possibly professionally. And in the electronics aisle, a fellow stood perfectly still, staring into a box of cables, the way you might stare at a puzzle you were not entirely certain you wished to solve. I, meanwhile, was loudly gasping over a mug shaped like a teapot, so I imagine I was somebody else's entertainment. The shelves were their own kind of theatre. There was an entire section of ceramic owls that someone, somewhere, had once believed was the beginning of a proper collection. A single ice skate sat on a shelf with no partner in sight, priced with complete confidence, as though somewhere in Portland a person was searching desperately for exactly one. And there was a framed painting of a sailboat that had clearly hung in someone's hallway for 30 years, judging by the sun fading down one side. It was not unpleasant, it simply looked tired, as though even the boat wanted to come ashore. I eventually found my envelopes in a stationery basket near the back. $1.50 for a barely used packet. Success. That should have been the end of the trip. A sensible person would have paid, left, and gone home. Unfortunately, by then, I had noticed something. Some shoppers were not wandering through the shop the way I was. They were checking labels, looking up names on their phones, studying the condition of dishes, coats, lamps, and figurines. The young woman who had nearly overtaken me in the first aisle was standing beside a trolley filled with clothing, examining every collar label as though she were reading confidential documents. And it occurred to me that some of these people might not be shopping for themselves. They might be buying things to resell. That changed the shop completely. A lamp was no longer merely a lamp. A coat was no longer merely a coat. Everything suddenly had two possible values: what the shop was asking, and what somebody else might be willing to pay. Naturally, I responded to this important financial realization by buying several things for myself. I found a cardigan that fit as though it had been waiting specifically for me. $3. I found a stack of paperback mysteries I will almost certainly never read, but felt spiritually obligated to rescue. 50 cents each. And then I found the teapot, not the mug. An actual teapot shaped like a cottage. It had tiny windows, a little front door, and absolutely no practical place in my life. I did not need it. I had not planned for it. It is now sitting on my kitchen counter as we speak. I walked out having spent $11 and acquired, near as I could calculate, 4 things I had not known I wanted 20 minutes earlier. The bags went into the boot. The ridiculous cottage teapot sat on the passenger seat as though it had earned its own seatbelt. But instead of driving home, I stayed there for 10 minutes, watching people bring donations through the doors. A woman carried in a laundry basket filled with folded sweaters. A fellow wrestled an armchair out of the back of a pickup truck as though it owed him money. A teenager brought in a cardboard box and looked personally offended by everything inside it. One after another, people entered the shop, carrying things they no longer wanted, and I had just come out delighted by things somebody else had given away. That was when the idea arrived. If I could find something valuable by accident while looking for envelopes, what might I find if I came back and searched on purpose? Not for myself, to sell. I did the only sensible thing a woman does when she has a mad idea in a parking lot. I rang my sister. "Mare," I said, "I've had a thought." "God help us," she said. "Go on. You know the thrift store I went to today? The one you entered for envelopes and left carrying a ceramic cottage? It's a teapot. It's an architectural warning. Continue. I think I could go back, buy things cheaply, and sell them for more than I paid." There was a pause. Mare has several kinds of pauses. This was the one where she had not yet decided whether to laugh at me or alert the family. "You," she said slowly, "wore the same cardigan to 3 different weddings because you refused to buy another one. It was a very good cardigan. And now you want to buy more things? To sell them, Mare, it's different. Is it? It's business. It's you in a thrift store with a receipt as your only legal defense." But then she went quiet, and I could hear her actually considering it. Because whatever else Mary may be, she has never rejected a plan involving money that is not currently ours. "How much are you risking?" she asked. $20. That is not a business. That is an unusually ambitious lunch. $20 is plenty. For you, in a shop containing books and unnecessary crockery? I'll have rules. That is what you said before the cottage. Still, she agreed, and the next morning I returned to the same thrift store with $20 in my purse, Mare's warnings in my head, and one firm instruction: I was not allowed to buy anything I wanted to keep. That rule lasted nearly 7 minutes. The shop looked exactly the same, but I looked at everything differently. The first time I had asked, would I like this? Now I asked, who else would want this? And then the much more frightening question, what might they pay for it? I found a proper brass lamp, heavy, solid, and far more dignified than anything costing $6 had a right to be. Instead of thinking, that would look lovely in my sitting room, I thought, that would look lovely in somebody else's sitting room for considerably more than $6. Then I found 4 matching dinner plates, barely a scratch on them, $4 for the set. Next came a wool coat with a designer label sewn into the collar. It was the sort of name that means a great deal to people who care about labels. I have never been one of those people, but apparently I was about to become their unofficial supplier. $8, and then I saw the mixer, a proper stand mixer. Heavy, solid, the kind that costs real money when it is new. It was sitting on a low shelf with an as is sticker and a final markdown price of $1.50. I checked the tag 3 times because I assumed one of us had misunderstood the situation. There was a wall socket near the register, so I asked whether I could test it. The cashier agreed, although her expression suggested this was not how she expected her afternoon to develop. I plugged it in. It hummed to life. I laughed out loud, which caused the maker's mark man 2 shelves over to look at me as though I was lowering the tone of the establishment. My total came to $19.50, 50 cents under budget. Buying the items turned out to be the easy part. Selling them was where the education began. Myers suggested Facebook Marketplace because, according to her, it was simple. You take a photograph, write a description, name a price, and someone buys it. That was technically accurate, in the same way that saying, you sit in a chair and arrive in another country, accurately describes air travel. What she failed to mention was the photography crisis. I took 19 pictures of the brass lamp. 19. Under the kitchen light, it looked jaundiced. Beside the window, there was a glare across the base that made it appear to be concealing evidence. I finally carried it onto the back step and took one photograph that made it look like a lamp an actual person might willingly purchase. The mixer was worse. I decided buyers should see it working, so I filmed a 15-second video of it whipping absolutely nothing. Just an empty bowl going round and round. Declan watched over my shoulder and asked why I had filmed a horror movie about a mixer having an existential crisis. Once the photographs were acceptable, I priced everything. The lamp cost $6. I listed it for $22. The plates cost $4. I listed them for $18. The coat cost $8. After researching the label and nearly falling off my chair, I listed it for $45. And the $1.50 mixer went up for $65. Typing those prices required more nerve than buying the things had. I briefly looked at eBay. Within 10 minutes, I was drowning in shipping estimates, fees, and something called a final value percentage that sounded like an examination I had failed without taking. I tried Poshmark for the coat and got as far as photographing it in 6 kinds of lighting, before deciding that one platform was enough excitement for the week. Facebook Marketplace it was. All 4 listings went live. Then I put the phone face down, made a cup of tea, and waited to discover whether anyone in America wanted my nonsense. The phone buzzed 40 minutes later. Someone wanted the lamp. Full price. No haggling. No offer of $11, a broken toaster, and the promise of good karma. Just, is this still available? I said yes. We arranged to meet that evening in a busy public parking area. Mare came with me, partly for safety and partly because she had already begun referring to herself as senior management. The buyer arrived on time, looked at the lamp and said, "Oh, this is nicer than the photos. I have decided to treat that as the greatest compliment of my professional career." He handed me $22. I handed him the lamp, and that was it. He drove away. I stood there holding the cash, feeling as though I had gotten away with something, though I could not say exactly what. Then I performed a small and deeply undignified victory dance beside Mare's car. She denies joining in. She did. 2 days later, the plates sold to a young woman setting up her first apartment. The coat went 3 days after that. The buyer used actual exclamation marks when she recognized the label. For one brief moment, I felt guilty charging $45 for something I had bought for $8. Then I remembered that was the entire point. The buyer was delighted. I was delighted. There was no victim in the cardigan. The mixer took a full week. Eventually, a man starting a small baking business from his kitchen contacted me. He tested it when we met, listened to the motor, and handed me $65. Later that evening, he sent another message to say it was already earning its keep. That sale felt different. The lamp was decorating someone's home. The plates were helping someone start one. The coat had found a person who appreciated it, but the mixer was now working in a small business. Something that might have sat unnoticed on a thrift store shelf was suddenly helping someone earn money. I liked that more than I expected. Now let's do the sums, because I promised I would always show my work. The lamp cost $6 and sold for $22. The plates cost $4 and sold for $18. The coat cost $8 and sold for $45. The mixer cost $1.50 and sold for $65. Total spent $19.50. Total received $150. Profit $130.50. I've read that number several times, and it still feels slightly ridiculous. Now, I'm not claiming every trip will go this well. Some shelves will be picked over. Some items will sit for weeks. I will almost certainly buy something that turns out to be desirable, only to me, and one extremely confused woman in Ohio. There will be messages from people who ask whether something is available and then disappear from the earth. There will be prices I get wrong. There may even be another empty bowl mixer film. But this was not magic. It was a simple process. Buy carefully, check the condition, research the value, know who might want it, be patient, and do not be afraid to ask for more than you paid, merely because the number makes your stomach flutter. I'm not, by any conventional definition, a businesswoman. I've never used the word entrepreneur about myself without immediately laughing. I do not have a storefront, a warehouse, a logo, or a complicated plan. My current business strategy is, buy the good thing, sell it to someone who wants it more than the shelf does. And yet, $1.50 became $65, $20 became $150. For years, I assumed the options for earning extra money at my age were rather limited. Nobody mentioned that a woman over 60, armed mostly with stubbornness and a decent eye for a bargain, could walk into a thrift store and see value where other people had walked straight past it. And that may be the most important thing I found. Not the lamp, not the coat, not even the mixer having its existential crisis. It was the realization that I did not need to begin as an expert. I only needed to pay attention, to look at something twice, to ask whether an overlooked object or an overlooked ability might still have value. Sometimes opportunity does not arrive with a business plan and a brass band. Sometimes it is sitting quietly on a lower shelf with an as-is sticker and a price of $1.50. Mayor has already found another lamp she says has potential. From Mary, that is either high praise or a warning. We are going back next week, together this time.